What's up,
Don't
League
do
of
it.
Legends summoners?
Don't do that.
I'm Nightwing. That's JTH.
I'm not doing
One
that
of our
again.
one of our most viewed videos for all the newest subscribers back when we first started, back in the day when you were really attractive, was our EU power rankings, which I got the team right. G2 won the split as I predicted. He predicted Fnatic actually, and they got third, so they were pretty close actually. He actually had Origen rated higher than I did. I had Origen like at sixth place. Going into the
seventh, you didn't even have it in playoffs.
I didn't have playoffs.
You didn't have it in playoffs.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure.
I did have Origen playoffs. No, I had Origen playoffs. They were just a playoff team. Remember what I said?
Splyce, Team Vitality, Fnatic, G2, and...
I had Splyce out of the playoffs because I said Origen was just a playoff team.
No, you didn't have Splyce out of the playoffs, I remember.
I had
You put him
Splyce
at
in
sixth.
seventh.
You had him at sixth.
He's trolling me right now
I don't
because
think so.
he hated the way I was right. So now the EU is gonna start in when?
What's
EU
up?
starts in like a week, I think, right?
It
About a
starts
week?
in 6 days. It starts on June 1st.
Okay, so EU is gonna start very soon. So we're like we gotta get a bunch of content out because there's a lot of power rankings that change from spring to summer. Now their expectations have been all fulfilled. So these are gonna be really different compared to last time because last time we actually agreed on a lot. This time it's gonna be a little bit different. So I wanted to group them in tiers. I think we'll group them in tiers on the NA video because
I don't
that's.
think they're necessary to group it. People want power rankings.
I mean,
They want tier lists.
LPL should be actually grouped in tiers.
No,
That's
it
when
should not.
there's so many teams in the LPL.
Okay, then just list the rankings, man.
Oh God, he used to be so much fun. We used to go out and get girls and go
Okay,
to bars,
so-
but now you've just been you.
We'll start at number 10 then.
10.
Or do you want to start at number 1?
Actually, number.
up to you.
Actually,
Let
we
you
could just say our rankings and then just go off our opinions.
Why is that necessary? Just go
You don't
one
ever
by
want
one.
to switch it up. Oh my goodness, he
Wait.
just wants to talk to you guys a lot.
You're just trying to speed it up, expedite the process. Is all it is.
Why are you using big words I don't understand?
I almost said speed up, so you obviously know what the word is.
We'll be like driving. He'll be like, "Oh my goodness!" He'll start using big words to counteract his English, and he'll be like,
Okay.
"What?"
So I think we should start at number 10. You want to do
Well,
that?
last split I started first, so you're starting first this time around.
I don't care. I just you want me to go number 1? I'm 10 or number 1?
I'll
We'll
go
just do number 10. Okay, so number 10, I still think it's gonna be Rogue.
I think this like if you had a D tier, this is what D tier looks like.
I mean, they didn't make any substantial differences in their lineup, right? Their
They
lineups-
changed up their jungler.
Yeah, they
They're gonna
only
bring the
changed up
master
the
jungler
jungler.
in. They promoted Finn over Profit.
Well, I mean, again, Profit, the top lane wasn't the problem. I think that Profit was doing pretty decently well in a large majority of the lanes. I think the big problem, again, is still going to be the bot lane. They didn't change out anything in that, right?
The
I still
bot
think
lane?
it's- Let me see. I still think it's the exact same lineup. I don't remember any news from it.
They still have HeQ. They still have HeQ and
If they have, I mean, again, if they have HQ, that's enough for me to say that team is not going to make it that very far. But again, let's see. Overview.
overview. Yeah, guys, we're all being professional here with this.
I don't care. I don't care what they think.
Oh yeah,
It's all about me.
It's not all about you. It's all about you, girl. Right?
There we go.
There we go.
On Rogue doesn't have anybody listed. That's kind of crazy, but I already know what their roster is, so I guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I think again with the HQ and the bot lane with them, I don't think there's going to be much of a difference.
I wasn't
going
super
on.
surprised by Finn, personally.
I think he did pretty decently, but again, Prophet didn't play much worse, and if that at all. I mean, again, Finn gives up the ability for them to pick up an import slot, and that's the only reason I think he's acceptable. Beyond that, I don't think he's that much of a difference. I don't think he makes much of a difference in general. I'd like to see something else in terms of like roster swaps, because again, now that they have the import slot filled up, I mean, like free, I would really like to see a bot lane pick, because there's no excuse for HQ still being in the LEC. He's not even academy level in my opinion. I don't think he's good enough to play at that. So I'd like to see him just relegated at this point to the what's it called, the EU Masters scene.
Man, don't put that curse on them with HeQ.
Okay, so I mean, again, I think there's a few things that I do like about HQ. I like the fact that he doesn't take resources because he sucks. That's the only thing that I think is really incredibly good.
You can play Ezreal.
Anybody can. I mean, no, Ezreal's actually pretty hard late game, but yeah, I mean, all around, I think this is gonna be a 10th place team because they didn't make any substantial roster swaps. So
I feel like they'll win a few more games than they did last.
Well, I mean, again, they are still better than the bottom tier in NA because they are slightly aggressive. They do make proactive plays around the map, but that's not going to be enough because their roster in general is just weak. Their top side, their bot side, their middle. They literally don't have a strong side on this team.
If they bring in the Larson guy from the EU Master scene, Would he be a benefit for them?
I mean, Larson's pretty decent from.
It's actually pretty good, actually.
But I don't think he's enough to make this team good. You can't have one good player. I mean, Finn's moderately okay, but I mean, again, their jungle's never been a big problem either. So I mean, if they want to make a large impact on the scene, they need to replace this ADC. So
I think that when you look at Rogue from last split, there are just so many issues. People knew going in that they weren't going to be that good. Now, that might be because of the way you spent money on the roster. You know, after spending that much money to get into the LEC, you're probably not trying to spend a lot of money on a bunch of other players. Looking at Profit, that's more like a side grade for Finn. They switched up their jungler because they dropped... Okay, so going into this, guys, forgot to tell you, they dropped Senkux and Kikis and Wadid, if you guys didn't watch the news videos. So they're putting in 3 new players. So you're also putting in 3 new players who have never played together, who are also going to have to go through synergy issues during summer. Yeah, this is going to be a 10th-place team again. I don't really see this happening. Like, Larson's good. I saw him in the match. Larson's fine, but one guy with EQ. Larson with EQ. Come on, man.
Again, I'm not going to take synergy into consideration. I don't know anything about how good their synergy is at this point. But
I imagine it's not going to be that great.
I mean, we can imagine, but that's all we can do. So.
But yeah. Rogue. Do you know that Rogue are backed by Imagine Dragons?
Okay, so
Radioactive.
Stop, please. Okay, so number 9 is gonna be Schalke for both of us still.
Man, I don't know where to start with this.
Well, I mean, again, Schalke is on roster. I think they have. If this was last year, I think they would have one of the better rosters in the league. I mean, Odoamne had a slightly weak last year, but he's picked it up this year. But Memento has been terrible this year. I mean, they picked up what's his name? Trick to actually apparently either mentor or take over the starting spot, which at this point, I mean, they do need to make an aggressive play because the jungle was a big problem towards the later half of the split. Abedigi, I mean, you can say whatever you want about him, he was not incredible.
Abedagi?
I don't care.
he's like, this guy is not good, so I don't pronounce his name right.
Well, I'm just saying, he just wasn't.
It wasn't impactful, wasn't good, didn't win lane half the time.
Half the time is a stretch. I don't think he won almost ever. I mean, again, I think their strongest point is going to be the bot and the top. Those are the two. Their side lanes are the strongest point of this team. Everybody else is just not playing up to their standard. So maybe with the Trick coming onto the roster, maybe he can take over and at the very least be a more conservative jungler, which doesn't really function in this meta, but it's better than Memento constantly feeding.
Running it down mid.
Yeah, so I mean, Abedigi, I would prefer. I mean, he's new to the scene. I'll give him some slack. He just got in here. Maybe that was a bad split, but Memento doesn't have an excuse for that. He's been playing well for a while in the professional scene. So.
You could compare it to the Afro situation. Those players will have the one bad split.
I wouldn't suggest getting rid of Memento because again, his highs are pretty high, but that's like his low was insanely low this split. He was one of the worst junglers in the league, and Abedigi was one of the worst mid laners. So if you want to see this team succeed. I mean, again, pick up roster moves where you can get new, like junglers because I don't think this is the correct move. I don't think Trick was the correct player, but I do think getting a new jungler was the correct move.
I think the jungler move was fine, but you're picking up Trick, who has not looked good since I don't know when, maybe spring
2016,
2017 probably. I think
2017. Okay. I was going to say summer 2016.
Summer 2016, yeah. I had the wrong split. Oh, man, I don't know where to start. Last split, they started off as strong as a lot of people predicted, and then they went like a train. You go straight off a cliff.
By a lot of people, do you mean my
no, there are some people had him actually at like 3rd, 4th, somewhere between there.
Didn't I have him
you had him at
third.
2nd.
I had him at 3rd. I had
Fnatic
Fnatic
yeah.
at 2nd.
Because I think most of what I said about the team came true. You know, the synergy issues, the certain players wanting to play a game a certain way. You know, Upset is going to try to play like Sven. Odoamne tries to, have an early game impact that can go one to two ways. I feel like Odoamne's problems never really got better, except that on, like, Splyce, they were never really addressed because he was just a rock on their team.
On Splyce, yeah, this year I think he's stepped it up drastically.
Yeah,
actually.
But I feel like some of those issues he did have on Splyce never really changed.
He was
coming
never
into Schalke.
I think he was one of a decent top laner this year. I don't think he was a big problem on this team.
But I think like toward the later end of the split, it became like his problems started showing up again. Like he kept overextending. He wasn't really having favorable trades.
I think the realistic reason for this is because again, once you start falling out like apart around the map, there's not going to be a stability in the top lane when you realize that the rest of the team is falling apart.
Like, he played some good Kennen games.
I mean, again, I think the later half of the split I can excuse because everybody fell apart. I think that's not really on him. So I think, again, Memento getting replaced is a pretty decent choice. I think letting Abedigi try and develop is another decent choice because I think that we don't know if he's terrible yet. He's only been a split. Give him one more split, or at the very least some part of the split. If he doesn't step it up, I'd suggest relegating him back into the Masters scene.
Because I think Ignar, he looked good for a couple of weeks, but like I said, I think that was because Upset was just massively doing a lot of the work.
What? I mean, a lot of it came off of Ignar making really good aggressive engages.
He got the
I think the problem,
the aggressive support picks they gave him.
well, you can't stop an aggressive support because there's a million picks for that. I think the biggest problem was, like, again, Ignar.
Ooh, I forgot one. Coaching staff. They have Dylan.
I don't care about
They had
that.
Dylan and D-Lim. I think Dylan tried to bring his Fnatic knowledge to that, and it just wasn't working out because the players just don't have that type of play style. Their sense of macro, their sense of direction around the map just wasn't there for them. I think moving forward, what they need to do to be a better team. Now, forgot to say, these power rankings are literally just power rankings. If they finish like in playoffs, whatever, you know.
Well, I don't care if they turn it around. We can't predict that, so there's not really anybody who can say, "Oh, you're stupid."
I mean, they can't call me stupid. I'm
They can
incredibly
definitely call
smart.
you stupid. But I think that's pretty much. You have anything else to say about?
Every single good thing about them just fell apart, and I feel like their players are really weak mentally. You saw that in the games themselves. They look like they defeated themselves after draft. They defeated themselves in the game when they lost. Like they lose team fights. They don't try to contest objectives anymore. I think they're a very weak, fragile team in terms of mentality. But I think that's something that you have to go for with looking how a roster is going to pan out. Weak mental, not a strong sense of macro in EU definitely doesn't work out. And in EU where the mid laners are stacked, man, I'm not having hope for these guys. Sorry, Schalke, you're in 9th place right now.
That's really
8th place for us.
using your announcer voice now.
I tried.
Okay,
8th
so
place.
8th place for me. I'll just go first since you wanted me to. I'm going to say SK Gaming. I think, again, their one move was to replace the top lane for the next split, correct? Yeah, I think that's the only move they made. Again, their bot lane, Crownshot actually does have a lot of games where he does pop off, I'll admit. But I think he's probably the most inconsistent lane, ADC in the entirety of the Western scene. He either does extremely well or he has completely terrible games. And Dreams is not... Like, again, Dreams is probably on the same level. I think that's just... They're a combination of two really inconsistent players in the singular lane, so that's why you see this so often. Pyrian is pretty standard. I think he's a pretty middle of the pack, maybe slightly lower mid laner. And then Sakura, I mean, he looked good in the master scene, but there's not much we can say beyond that. I mean, again, the biggest problem in the SK lineup was still gonna be a secondary carry, and maybe Sakura can bring that. And like if you look at their win rates, most of their wins came off when Crownshot was doing well. They did win. When he wasn't, again, and forced Selfmade to do poorly. I mean, forced Selfmade to be that singular carry. They weren't able to do much. World actually didn't play that poorly in the last split. If anybody says they're basing it off,
there were a couple of Jax games where he didn't split push properly.
Well, I mean, again, that's probably team shot calling at that point, though. But again, I think that World stepped it up drastically this year in comparison to the previous, where I think he was almost consistently always a bottom tier top laner. I think he again made it to the middle of the pack this year. World, I mean, again, a lot of people are basing it off past precedents where they say, "Oh, he was terrible all these years," which he was. I mean, he's been bad massive amount of years, but he's been actually pretty decent this year. I do think Sakura's probably going to be a step up, but at that, and it might have been the correct move, but unless Sakura is
like self-made level, the way he was carrying the games,
yeah, then I don't think this is going to be a big step up for them, honestly. Again, Crownshot's just insanely inconsistent, and that's nothing with a top lane change is going to change that. I don't think that's going to make a difference. Self-made, again, he's still one of the better junglers in the league. I still think he's the second or third. Pyrian, he's still. I mean, again, he's not going to push you to that next level. He's an import on top of the fact that he's not that incredible. I mean, he will at the very least be competent enough to not feed super hard unless it's against the top 3 middle laners in the league. So all around, I don't think this team is that good. Again, most of it relied on like blatant aggressive jungling to get them past the early part of the split, which they did actually rank pretty high, but they started falling off a little bit towards the
They
later
fell
half.
off like there. This is how I talk about SK Gaming. There's gonna be a lot of things I'm gonna go over, but I'm trying to butcher them up for you guys to understand. SK Gaming is that one team in all of professional sports where nobody predicts them to do well. They'll go on like a winning streak because no one's gonna predict them to do well. Then when the better teams start playing better, that's when their issues start showing, because now that the better teams are better, your team is still worse by comparison because they were always worse in general.
Well, it's not always the case. Sometimes there's over performances.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's that. I think they benefited from both a meta shift. Well, not a meta shift, but the meta, which is aggressive jungling, does end up winning you the game. Can you please just shut off that?
Oh my gosh. I have my girl playing.
Just turn off the sound, man.
Oh my goodness. All my notifications are on.
It's
You guys
always on.
got.
Okay, so I think that again, aggressive jungling, which is extremely beneficial in this meta, is what made what's it called? What
made Selfmade pop off?
Selfmade, no, just it's SK in general succeed because Selfmade is an incredibly decent early game jungler. On top of the fact that Crownshot does have those games, and a lot of it at the beginning where when he plays well, he's incredibly good. So I think that the big problem for this team is gonna be. Again, you're gonna have to base it off of this team, like, if you're gonna have to base it off of the meta, not shifting away from like early aggressive jungling, and you're gonna have to hope that that's what stays the same for this team, which I don't think it's gonna stay the same for the rest of the year because it's been that way for about 2 years now.
Because you get about 3 patch changes: the one for summer, the one in the middle of summer, and the one before going to Worlds. So they're at least gonna go through 2 patch changes in general.
So all around, I think that again, SK Gaming might actually make it towards that high, like later half of this, like the higher echelon of the scene, but I don't think they will. I think that again, their struggles in terms of just consistency in the bot lane and like just how good Sakura is actually going to turn out. On top of the fact the mid lane's not that good, so if Sakura doesn't actually turn out to be that secondary carry that this team needs, they don't need a solid top laner because they had that in Warlove. That's not going to make a difference for them. They need the secondary carry to take over. So when Crownshot doesn't step up, they do actually have somebody to help Selfmade to push to the next level. I'm push this team to like a win because again, Crownshot does have a lot of bad games. So
so does Pyrian. That's the thing though. Some of the times that the games that they even lost later on in the split are because he got outbeaten so badly that Selfmade couldn't cover up the weaknesses in mid.
Well, again, he loses to the top tier mid laners. That's just what he does. Yeah. I don't expect anything else from him. That's what you're gonna get from him. He's been playing for a long time, so you know what it is.
Yeah. My problems with SK is that I think they made playoffs last split. Remember, they made it on a tiebreaker. That means that's like one game from not making playoffs versus making playoffs. Those are razor thin margins already as it is, and they beat a team that was already mentally defeated. The coach himself say they didn't even do good in scrims leading into the week. And I'm still looking at SK as that one team that does well when it first starts, and then they fall off because the better teams perform.
SK is not that bad even on paper. They're not horrible.
But if Sakura is not self-made level, then not only is the roster move not making any sense, but I feel like they're just going to be the exact same team. So yeah, SK for me. Sorry.
No, it wasn't SK for you. That's not right. SK's your number 8 was stiff.
Oh no, I was coupling your points.
Yeah, but
my 8th place team, is gonna be Excel, because I do feel like Excel, they more or less made side grades than really anything else. Because looking at last split, Excel had Expect, K-Drill, and they had like Exile and Cassine and stuff like that. Excel's direction around the map was atrocious. Their pick and ban phase was bad. They didn't really know what to do on the map. Most of the players were doing their own thing. They weren't a cohesive unit. Exile was not good. They switched out that guy for who was special.
And he did well.
I thought he played pretty well actually, but it was too late in the split to do anything. Expect had a few good games where he could challenge the top laners, but it wasn't consistent enough. K-Drill was probably, if we're going to do a series called the most improved players, and I was going to say K-Drill.
K-Drill is number 1. I don't think it's without a doubt anybody can compete with him.
K-Drill was playing so well, but he also had days he played good in one day, but then didn't play so good the next day.
I get it. That's just how the jungle works. It's just extremely feast or famine.
So, like, with this kind of team, that's why I had him at 9th, going 8th place, because I don't feel like they really made any substantial moves, and I feel like they lost their surprise factor, and I feel like now people going in knowing what they're going to know about them is not going to really change much, because you're also replacing Exile with Mickey, they're essentially the same player. Really, if you want to call Excel a coin flip player, then Mickey's a dice. You know what you get with dice? Random numbers, because that's what dice give you. Because that's how it works.
I like that.
Yeah, Dan, you want to give me a fist bump for that?
No.
Gosh. So, yeah, I'm not really seeing it with them. I know some people are a little hopeful for them because, you know, what they've been saying on social media and so that means nothing. Because unless they're putting it on the Rift, it means almost nothing to me. Okay. And Yarnin wasn't really ever that good. I was a G2 fan, still am.
You can't deny that that's a step up, though. It's a drastic step up.
Yeah, but I do feel he's like the pole belter for ADCs. He's good enough.
But just a bad comparison this year.
I know. He's like the Pyrian of ADCs, though. He's like good enough, but anything above him, you already know Yarnin's ceiling. And you know Kasing's ceiling. They played together before. We know what we're going to get out of the bot lane.
Kasing's not going to be starting, dude. There's no way.
Who are they going to start?
Definitely do Mystiques.
Okay, if they play Mystiques, he's good.
Mystiques has been playing most of what's it called? So again, I don't know if the Mickey thing is confirmed yet. Is it?
It's almost confirmed.
It's all again. I think this. I mean, I actually have. We swapped SK Gaming and XL. I think that the reason that I think XL is a little better, first off, is because XL honestly did pick it up drastically towards the later half of the split when they replaced XL with Special and when they replaced Kasing with Mystiques. This team, instead of having just an aggressive jungler who's not able to help these like kind of floundering lanes, they have Expect, who's been a really rock solid top laner this entire year. They have Kadril, who's been one of the most successful early game junglers in the league. I think he's right out of the top 3.
Yeah, I put him right up at that 5th place spot, actually.
4th or 5th, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, again, Mystiques was drastic. His ability to play aggressive early game supports is why I think he's one of the better supports in the league now. Like, he looked incredibly decent towards the later half of the split. Like, he really drastically changed this team's kind of the way they functioned. I mean, they looked so much better with him on the Rift than when they did with the Kasing, which is kind of sad because I thought Kasing didn't play that poorly.
Yeah, actually, I think Kasing would function better on other teams, not them.
And then with Yarnin in spot of Jessica, who I think is slightly better, if even better than EQ. I think with that all being figured out, I think that not only did this team look incredibly decent towards the later half of the split, and they looked like one of the most aggressive early game teams in the league by the end of it. Not only did that happen, but I think their roster moves in general, I think that this really did help them figure out that, I mean, their ability to fix their game at the beginning, I mean, later half of the split, on top of the fact that an improved roster, I think they are going to be better than SK in this split, just based off of that. And if they do have Mickey, which I don't know if it's true or not yet, because I haven't seen a confirmed thing on it, if they do end up having that, they have an extremely aggressive early game in every single lane, on top of the fact that they have...
Well, Mickey was not bad. I think people really overrate his bad games.
Well, yeah, again, he's bad, but his good games are incredibly decent. I think that he can compete with anybody in this league if he has a good day. I think that a big problem for this team is going to be...
There's also the coach, Dylan. He's now with them, actually.
Yeah.
So he's going to want to bring some style of macro to the team, I imagine.
Yeah, I think that this team is going to succeed... I mean, based off of just pop-off games, they can beat pretty much anybody if all of them are performing to standard. I mean, if they're playing their best. But, again, I think there's going to be a lot of inconsistencies, as we know, with Mickey. Expect, again, I said all these early aggressive lanes, but I forgot that Expect is just, again, that rock-solid player you want. I think Yarnin Mystiques, with the aggressive early game picks in the bot lane, is going to be a pretty decisive bot lane. I think they're going to be better than, again, Vitality's bot lane. Like a few other bot lanes. I think that this is going to be a reason as to why I honestly think they could possibly make it in the playoffs, but it's going to be... I need to see more from this team in general.
Yeah.
Like, just not based off of them improving. Now they have different players, and I want to see if this play style that they had last year carries over into this new roster, which I do think is a lot better on paper, but I want to see it first. All right, so you have anything? We had them switched around. That's our 6th.
The reason why I had SK Gaming at 8th, I had SK at 8th. Okay, so Schalke, me. Okay, so I'm just making sure I got it. So we're at 7th now, right?
You're explaining. We already talked about SK Gaming.
Yeah. Okay. So the reason why I had SK above XL is because last split, what I saw out of SK was an extremely aggressive early game. That if I see a team like Excel drafting passive laners, expecting to get through early game, and a team like SK Gaming, I feel like is a lot faster, and I feel like they're gonna get a lot more wins more consistently by being a faster paced team.
I don't know if I agree with that. Excel was one of the fastest paced teams in the league by the end of it.
But SK did it like majority of the split though.
Yeah, but SK Gaming also fell off towards the end, where so as Excel picked it up at the very middle of the pack, right when they picked up a new player, they never played. They were one of the most again. Even if you look at that G2 game where they got a lead early game at the very beginning of the split, they still did that.
But you also have to look at the fact that self-made is just a big defining difference between Excel.
I mean, Occasional is still great in and of its own. I don't think he's as good as self-made, but he's been incredibly decent this year. I don't think the jungle is a weakness of this team.
So that was one of the reasons why I had him above, Excel. I think that I saw more out of SK being more earlier and proactive than Excel. Excel did it a little bit too late, but
it was like at the beginning, towards the middle half of the split, dude. That was not too late.
Man, he just wants to overrate me so much.
I don't want you to say stuff like that, honestly. Gosh. That's all I'm saying.
You want a fist bump?
No.
All right. So now we're at the playoff teams, right?
Playoff teams? We are on 6th place now.
Yeah, okay, so we're at the playoffs.
We have the same exact 6th place team, which is Misfits.
Man, I don't know where to start. This is probably the one that if it doesn't work, we're gonna get flamed a lot.
Well, again, they showed that they're not that great this split, and we're taking a chance because I do think their roster on paper should be better than they're playing. Again, their problem is, again, underperformance on Fevin's part, which has been a big deciding factor as to why they haven't been one of the better teams in the league.
Language barrier.
Well, that might be a big thing. I've talked about this a million times, so I want to bring it up.
To bring up the language barrier point, Pumandu left. So, yeah, that's going to be even harder. I imagine it would be even harder for them not having a Korean coach or a Korean translator or whatever they have on their team.
Possibly, but again, I think oh, jeez, get off me, stupid dork.
Was that
It was a little gnat. But
gosh.
Again, I think the big problem with this team is going to be, again, a lot of them are better than they're playing. Again, so has even played really well during the beginning of the split.
He played good for a good majority of the weeks, though.
Yeah, and it was kind of incredible that probably one of the best splits he's had in a while. I mean, not including the playoffs, obviously, because I think he played just better during then. But one of the better splits he's had in a while, they didn't actually succeed. Kind of surprised me a little bit, but again, I think that Soaz is not a big problem with this team, which I thought he was going to be. He's one of the more solid pieces. I think a big problem with this team is their inability to play around anything but bot, which is, again, why Team Liquid wasn't even able to succeed against G2, is because once you start focusing the spot lane, I think that's a big reason as to why they did so well against Team Liquid, obviously, too. Because they understood the concept. Again, it's probably because they played against Misfits so often.
It's the same concept that I used last year. That's the reason why I thought Cloud9 could beat RNG. You simply just go to the bot lane and beat it. The team is going to fall apart. Well, this is from someone who's watched all the RNG games and a lot of the Cloud9 games, too.
Again, RNG had more than just a bot lane, though.
But their main focal point, their win condition was Uzi. So if you beat him and beat Ming, then you're going to win the game.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't think Cloud9 could have beat RNG last year because, again, the mid lane was still better than Jensen. So I think that would have
been... Xiaohu? Oh, no.
Xiaohu was definitely better.
He's not... People overrate him so much. He's not that good.
He was actually incredibly decent. I don't know why you're saying... He's above average at the very least, and Jensen is not incredibly decent on the international stage.
He is doubting our EU superstars, man.
He's not a superstar anymore, in my opinion.
Gosh, he won that tournament?
It's not one. I mean, when has he ever popped off at an international tournament?
The 2018, 2017 Worlds?
2018, 2017. He did not pop off in 2018. He beat a lot of the lowered mid laners.
I don't know. See, those are debatable things.
They're not really debatable.
I think you just taking credit away from Western mid laners because you're Korean biased.
I'm not Korean biased. I gave credit to Caps in them. I think that Jensen's just not on their level.
He slightly gave favor to Caps because Caps started beating Koreans.
I didn't even do that. I've always said Caps was pretty decent. I still don't think he's as good as the top two. But
when you're going at Misfits, there's so many different directions. Misfits have always been the same team. People need to understand that. And it's not changed. Maybe the split changes it, but I don't think that's going to be the outlier as to the other 4 splits they've been a part of.
So why did you put them at 6 then?
Okay. I do feel like their players are substantially better than everything below them. That's a start.
Well, that's what we said last split, though. Again, this is
I think going in, as you heard from what the players said, they've been scrimming. They did a Korean boot camp, I'm pretty sure. Most teams did. I imagine they did a Korean boot camp. They've been getting a chance to scrim a lot earlier on. Maybe they worked on synergy issues. Those are pluses and benefits. The games they did win, they looked pretty convincing. But the thing with Misfits, the reason why they're at 6th place, now Misfits would be a C-tier team because Misfits only dropped around Hansama. Hansama has 3 champions. And that strategy works against everything below them, but it's not going to work against anything above them. Because once teams figure out you hit Hansama's champion pool, it's over. It,
I mean,
it
again,
really is.
again,
Max Lord is one of the worst strongers in the league at this point.
I mean, again, I agree with the Max Lord point, but again, with the renewal of the crit ADCs, we did see that Misfits was able to draft more than that. I think the problem was, again, at the beginning of the year, a lot of it was on-hit ADCs were the only relevant thing. I think that he's improved drastically. I mean, Champion Pool is a lot bigger than it was shown because, again, the meta just didn't favor the crit ADC, so there was only a small majority of ADCs you could play.
I think that Gorilla played fine. I think people really made him look bad. I
don't think he should have been on that team again. He wasn't a good import.
Gorilla being on any other team would have worked out just fine.
Again, his playstyle does not fit a different region. I've said this a million times, and I don't think he should have been picked up.
I feel like he should have went to KT Rolls or a play.
Yeah, he would have looked incredibly decent on a Korean team, but I don't think he looks that good in an international team because, again, playmaking and shot calling which is a large majority of his best qualities can't be done with a language barrier.
And I even said before, Fedman was not going to compete with Caps, Jizuke, and Nuke Duck. It was very visibly shown all split long. He had one good game. And even that game they won against G2, realistically G2 threw that game, and it was like...
I don't know, they lost the early game.
But it was really hard for them to close out.
But G2 didn't really throw because they never really...
Okay, my bad. They threw because the SK Gaming game was a throw.
Yeah.
That game was the game that they're winning, they still can't win it. It's like... I think what they need to do, draft Soaz, the tank, carry top laners, because he can play that more sufficiently now. You give Gorilla and Han some of the aggressive bot lanes. You don't give him a passive bot lane, otherwise your only win condition, they're like Team Liquid, except they're a little bit weaker in certain other places. If their bot lane's your win condition, then play through your bot lane, because Maxor is not going to give it to you anymore, from what I saw last split. So that's why they're 6 for me. They're 6 for him, because I can't imagine they finish 8th again.
Well, I mean, again, I think that this team, at the very least, is not as bad as they were last split. They're not as bad as they were on paper last split. I think they looked a lot better. I mean, at the very end of the split, they looked pretty decent. They looked like they picked stuff
They had
back up.
a 2-0.
Yeah,
that's pretty decent in the split off.
They 2-0'd a lot. Like, again, G2 didn't look as good as they should have been, but I still think that counts for something. Misfits did look incredibly decent towards the end of the split, and
I think that's where you're starting to think, this could be a good team.
Well, I mean, again, I think that is probably going to translate slightly into the next split, because, again, we saw them do well on that specific patch that is still relevant into this patch. Again, Misfits is going to look a lot stronger now that they have the ability to be more flexible in the bot lane. I think that the champion pool, at the very least, can't be targeted, but I do think the playstyle still can be, so they're never going to be able to beat the top teams unless they start getting better laners.
I could see them stealing wins off top teams.
Possibly. But again, I think it's going to all come down to I think that their mid lane needs to step it up. If they do, I think they can compete with pretty much anybody in this league. But everything else, I think, is pretty much still a problem. Maxlor, he should be replaced, but I don't know if they can. I don't know if there's a jungle in the league right now for him.
Oh, remember, they have Kire, the academy team.
Are they going to start him?
I don't think so.
Well,
but they have him there. They have an option. Kire did look good at the playing stage. So, I mean, Kire showed me more than what Maxwell showed me in 9 weeks. So.
I mean, the fact is they picked him up, so I do actually think it's a possibility they start him.
But even if they do, he's still kind of weak.
He's still a lot better than Maxwell, though, so I think it's still an upgrade. So I think that's all around. I think that's all there is for Misfits.
For Misfits, yeah.
So I think we have a different 5th place team. So
I'll let him go first.
Yeah.
He really didn't want to put them this far. We were arguing in the car. We were like, man, why are we putting this team this far ahead?
I put 5th place at Splyce. I think that Splyce is one of the most passive lane game teams in the league.
Passive was a term. Splyce is literally there for a dictionary.
In Splyce, they have a strong bot lane, which is kind of confusing as to why they don't play around it more often. But bot lane, I think they have one of the best early game aggressive bot lanes in the league. Yet, I think everything else kind of makes them not function well. I mean, in the other aspects of the game, again, their top lane is just... their top lane and jungle.
I think Vizichachi's gotten passively worse every split.
I think he started picking it up towards the very end, but again, he looked really bad throughout most of the split.
That Fnatic series, man, he looked so bad.
So, again, inconsistencies in the top lane is a big problem with him. I don't think he's able to compete. Odoamne looked a lot better than him this year, in my opinion. And
yeah.
That was a kind of drastic change from last year. I think that... God, man. I think that...
He's dying.
What's his name in the mid? What's his name in the mid?
Oh, New Humanoid. I thought Humanoid was the most underrated mid laner, actually.
I mean, again, he looked really... Coming into the league as one of the new mid laners, I think a lot of them didn't look good. If we look at Abedigi, he looked terrible.
Yeah.
I think that coming into this split, he took a slightly slower approach to it, and he looked didn't look that great at the beginning, but he started picking it up. Like, again, I think that's similar to Nemesis's change. I think, well, Nemesis looked good throughout most of the split, but
those first few weeks were kind of rough for him.
I think it was mostly just just counter picks. He didn't look that bad, but I think that Humanoid actually did look bad. At the beginning of the split, but he looked like one of the better mid laners in the league by the end of it, which is something you want to see out of a new mid laner who's just getting into the league. He did drastically increase the level of play that which he played at, and I think that's going to be a big reason as to why I think Splyce can actually keep up, because at the end of the split with a competent mid laner and the bot lane who's winning who's doing well in most of the lanes, which is keeping you afloat, so your passive early and aggressive play style they're not able to capitalize on it because they're losing the bot lane and the mid lane's going even. So with that, I think that puts them in a really good spot to where at the very least they can stave off some of this early game aggression from like some of the middle tier teams to where, and with that, if they stave off, I think they do actually win out towards a lot of the later game half of the later game teams. Again, Akabe,
he got all pro first team.
Yeah, he looked like one of the best ADCs in the league by the end of the split. So I think that's a big reason as to why Splyce, as much as I hate their playstyle, is going to succeed in this league, because, again, if you can't beat this early game, if you can't really put enough of a dent in their early game, they're not going to win the late game. And that's a product. Even G2, I don't think, would win the late game if they
lost the late game to Splyce, too.
If Splyce gets the early game lead, or at the very least doesn't lose too much against G2, they'd beat them, too. But G2 would probably still do it. G2 would probably still get the early lead. So that's pretty much it.
I have, for my 5th place team,
Don't be an
the Italian Stallions, Team Vitality. Now, last split I got it right. I had him at fourth, I think. He got it right. He had him actually at 5th. Okay, so Vitality to me are like, I don't like comparing teams to other teams because it's kind of unfair to them, but this is kind of what they are. They are IG with weaker players who only fight. They don't really do anything different. When they fight, they only fight. One person's... Okay, so it's like, he's my prized possession, right? And me and like 4 other guys, and he's getting attacked, and I'm going to have all my friends throw up, guy, I got to protect my JTH, and I got to protect this guy. That's how they play. They play like rabid rabbits.
Well, again,
when one is getting attacked, the other guy jumps in, and what does that mean? That means you have bad team fighting. One person is getting attacked, the other person is getting attacked, they all jump in. They have bad macro. They don't really do anything if they don't have a lead. If they get rolled over in the early game is over.
Again, I don't know if I'd make them very similar to IG. They have similarities, as in they like to rely on lanes.
Strong mid and top.
That's just a lot of, that's for a lot of teams though. G2 has a strong mid and top, yet I don't think they're anything similar to IG.
I think that Team Vitality's strengths come into the fact that
they have good solo laners.
Yeah.
I think that is the biggest problem. The biggest strength of them is their ability
Cabochard was the MVP for me last split.
Yeah.
I had Caps at 2nd.
Yeah, I think Wonder actually was a lot worse than him throughout most of the entire split. I think that if we're going to see like this Team Vitality team succeed, which we did actually have them flipped, I think that's a big thing we should say. If we're going to see this Team Vitality succeed, which I think they are probably going to do well, I think it's going to come off. Again, this meta is very
dependent
on solo laners and the jungler. I think it's mostly on the jungler, but solo laners have a drastic impact on the league.
And you look at Vitality, and you're going like, man, Mowgli, he didn't look horrible. So like going into the split, you're thinking like, oh, he's gonna have bad synergy issues. It didn't look like that for the majority of the split.
Again, I think that Team Vitality, again, they have a lot of strength. Like, again, I don't think anybody can compete with Cabochard, maybe besides Wonder. And Yuxei can compete with anybody. I think even Caps on a good day, and Yuxei on a good day is comparable. So I think that all around, I think they're, in terms of solo laners, there's no weakness. But in terms of flexibility in the jungler, I think I'd like to see a little more aggressiveness.
This is probably the least flexible team in the whole league.
Again, I don't know. I think that I'd like to see... That scared me. Yeah, but I'd like to see a little bit more aggressive tendencies out of Mowgli, because if they do end up playing more aggressive in the early game, I could see Team Vitality
challenging for a top 3 spot.
Yeah, I think they could. Again, I think the biggest problem is going to be... The biggest problem, again, obviously, is bot lane. I think that bot lane is just not that good.
Bot lane, it's just bot lane and flexibility, because Mowgli, even without communicating properly, look like a middle tier jungler.
But again, I think Mowgli being an aggressive jungler would maybe benefit the bot lane a little more, or maybe cover up their weaknesses in their
because
early
they
game.
really don't. Because they leave the bot lane on to dry.
Again, bot lane, Attila and Jack Troll are really terrible at the early game. I think they lose to pretty much most ADC. Like, they lose to Fnatic, they lose to Schalke, G2. They lose to pretty much everybody in the bot lane.
They lose to G2's bot lane. I mean, they just won MSI, so
Well,
they're losing a lot more to G2's bot lane now.
Again, G2's bot lane's not the best part of their team. But again, I think the biggest problem, if we're going to see this Team Vitality team kind of try and get into that top 3 spot, we need to see a more... Attila and Jack Troll are good when they get into the late game. They're fine. But that's the only time they're good. I think their early game is not... They can't cover it up because, again, the weakness in the bot lane is a big problem for them. Like, they cannot play that early game enough. I'd like to see if Mowgli could make an aggressive play towards the bot lane, or maybe try and get one of the other lanes far enough ahead to where they can get past that early game through the bot lane. They can play around other lanes. I mean, again, if Attila getting out of lane is a good player. Attila in lane is a terrible one. So
I think Mowgli, but he puts all of his resources in mid and top.
Again, I don't think that's a bad choice. If you cannot get to this bot lane and make them win, because they're not going to, you can maybe try and gank them and try to get them through the early game, but then your stronger lanes in mid and top are going to start losing because the jungler pressure.
That's the problem, though. Cabochard really doesn't lose.
Well, they're going to get ganked, and you're going to lose if you get ganked. That's why you need to focus on your stronger lanes. I think that all around, again, Attila Jack Troll, I think
they're going to have Yamato still. I think Yamato's still a fantastic coach.
I think that Jack Troll needs to get replaced. If I'm going to say something, I think that with a better support, they would actually look a little bit better in the early game. So, all around, I mean, again, Team Vitality... Kasing would be a pretty decent
He was on Vitality before, actually.
I think that if we want to see this team succeed again, the bot lane needs to be picked up. I mean, it needs to pick it up because they're lagging behind a little too much. And I mean, I could easily see this team not doing as well as I'm saying, and they could drop to 6th. But I still think they're gonna make the playoffs regardless.
I had Splyce. They're literally just flipped. My 4th is Splyce.
I think we already talked about it, right?
Splyce for me, I really didn't want to put them here, but if you look at that spring split, they were on a winning streak at one point. They picked it up. I'll talk about strengths first. Their strengths come from late game and being able. They are so good at being passive that just like I don't understand how teams don't punish it, but they don't. They don't punish it sufficiently enough, and they draft so effectively that their composition, not being tackled at a certain point, is going to roll you over. They lose to every single top team above them. We saw Fnatic steamroll them in that last week and in playoffs. But Splyce did kind of really, really troll and draft with the Veigar 80 carry and the games they've been playing. But overall, I think they're a lot better than what people give them credit for. You have Xerxes, who is actually probably about the 4th, 5th best jungler next to Kadriel. He played pretty well, all things considered. Kabe looked really good. Norscarin looked pretty good. You have Humanoid, who doesn't take up any resources. He roams around the map effectively, wards effectively around the jungle quadrant, so, Xerxes can make the aggressive moves. They have a lot of good things going for them. The issue is that they're so passive compared to the other top-tier teams that if you get anywhere behind, their whole game plan falls apart. You hear their coach talking about they want to play league like chess. Well, in chess, you can control where you're going. You can't really control where your opponents are going in league.
Well, I mean, that's the point of chess, too. The opponent moves themselves. You just have to outsmart them.
Can you outsmart people better than you, though?
I mean, again, there's not a lot... In terms of player abilities, I don't think there's a lot of people better than Splyce individually. I don't think that's the problem.
I think
their bot lane's better than G2's, in my opinion.
Their macro sense, as I think what people really, really underestimate about them, their macro sense is really strong. They have really good macro sense. Them getting to that point and actually executing it can vary depending on composition.
I mean, again, they would have succeeded. They would have been one of the best teams in the league if this was like season 6. Like they would have been incredibly.
That's weird though. They make the finals in season 6 though.
Yeah, but they're a lot better now.
Oh yeah, I mean they had Wonder and Mickey on the same team at one point. Oh man, good old days, right? He'll never do it. Overall, I think that their coach is fine. Their macro sense is fine. But they're too passive. And I think that with the way mid and jungle are working so aggressively, I think it's going to be... Early game is even more impactful. We saw it at the collegiate league, where just being so impactful early game just rolls the game over. Even more than what it did these last few patches ago. And I feel like they're almost about as least flexible as Vitality. I don't see them as flexible, because we saw Kabi try playing a mage bottom lane, and they lost the playoffs. So... We got the two least flexible teams, the teams who.
I think flexibility is something a lot of these like Misfits struggles a massive amount with flexibility too.
But I think they could pull it off with their caliber of players, though.
Misfits doesn't have as better players than Splyce, really. And again,
to some extent, maybe.
Even to some extent. I mean, if everyone loses
to Humanoid,
yeah,
that's sad.
Right now, yeah. I think the bot lane loses too. I mean, where do they even win?
Yeah. now Misfits he's gonna change the ranking to like 7 at this point.
I mean, I'm just saying, in terms of player wise, they can pull off a lot of stuff because they have good players.
Yeah,
that's why they're able to stall out the early game because, and like, skill wise, they're comparable with most everybody.
But I think that only gets you so far. Like they're like, they have the right idea, just not all the pieces in the right board to pull off the win. That makes sense.
Well, yeah.
So that's my 4th place. That's why I put Splyce higher than Team Vitality, because being smarter while also having weaker players at certain positions always gets you a little bit further in league. Like we've seen that a lot of times with the weaker teams. So I think that narrative is still kind of there to this day, and I don't think it's going to change anything right now. So
I think okay. So with that being said, I think the top
three.
Our number one, I don't think anybody can refute that. So we're gonna skip. We're gonna put more effort into the top of the 2 and 3.
Oh, I got a lot of points for these. Okay.
Okay. Our number 2 and 3 is flipped because we have completely different opinions on it. I think you want me to go first or
I could start. Okay. He's gone first the whole time, so I'll start. My 3rd place team is gonna be Origen. I do feel like Origen played really well throughout the back end of the split. They had a win streak. They went 11 games in a row, I think at some point. You have Cold and Nuke Duck and Mithy being the trio for this team. Alfari got better, but I think that Alfari also showed why he wasn't power ranked by a lot of people very highly when you get to the upper echelon of the top laners in EU. He played very, very average this split while having certain highs as well. Patrick, I think he's about as good as Perks, probably.
Patrick's drastic. Why do you give so little credit to Drastic?
But Perks played good. He's better now.
Perks not good on ADC picks.
I think
unfair to Patrick.
Cold is better than not Cold. Patrick is better than Attila. Patrick is better than he could be a level where Hansama is eventually, I think. But I don't think he's strong enough right now. But I think he's good enough right now with the team around him because he plays good with the team around him. That's what's so good about him. Like, he doesn't need resources to be good. He just needs to just stay alive. And I think Mithy is good enough to the point now where he's considered one of the best supports in EU again. So you have a really strong bot lane. You have arguably the 2nd best mid laner.
I think that's pretty much irrefutable right now. He's been the 2nd best for a while.
And then you have 3rd, 4th. Like, it's a tie between 4th and 5th junglers in EU.
I would put him at 3rd, actually.
Yeah, so you have a really strong jungler, a really strong mid laner, so it pairs up between the 2v2s. Alfari can stay stable in the top lane, and I think that's a good, well-rounded team altogether. Their issue, the players, as before with EU, it really depends on who's stronger. That it's kind of the whole it's like playing Yu-Gi-Oh. You gotta have that stronger monster to go over the other monster. They're like the weaker of the stronger players, though, but their players can pull it off more consistently. That's why I have them at 3rd. I don't think they're going to be Fnatic the way they did before. Because I do feel like Fnatic are the better team. And I feel like that day didn't show how strong Fnatic was. And I do feel like Origen benefited from Fnatic not performing up to standard.
Okay, I would like to, again, I think he's got a bit into it. So I want to say why I actually put them flipped a little bit. I think that, in my opinion, I think that Cold is drastically better than Broxy is. I still think that's the case. Throughout the entirety of the split, that was the case. Unless Broxy steps it up a little bit. He's not going to be able to compete with Cold in a meta that kind of fits the early aggressive junglers, and that's why I think they also beat Fnatic in that split. That series. If we're going to talk about again, and the bot lane, I think that's one of the better bot lanes in terms of how sensible they are. Patrick has been one of the most successful ADCs in the league. I would put him in the top 4 if anything. He's been really solid. I think that there's not really much you can say in terms of just how he's been playing because he's not been feeding. He's he's a smart player. I think that
he's not lane strong. That's his problem.
That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter because it's not a meta that is really defined by early game presence in the bot lane. So I think that it's not gonna that specific thing isn't gonna matter. And on top of the fact, most of the early game pressure is applied by the support. So I'd put most of the fault on Mithy, if anything. But again, Mithy makes things happen around the map, and I think his ability to macro shot call around the map is something that Fnatic just doesn't have right now. Something that even G2 doesn't have, but that doesn't matter. Like, I think that Origen is one of the smartest, if not the smartest team in the West in terms of just, like their ability to move around the map. I really do appreciate what they do, but at the same time, I it's just not enough to beat G2, obviously. But Origen does have the ability, like, they can pretty much compete with everybody in every single lane, except for, like, Afari does actually struggle a little bit against Wonder, so that's going to be their weakest lane in terms of the top teams. But again, if we're looking at Fnatic, I mean, Alfari's still better than Whippo is, so I don't think that's comparable, really. If we compare the mid lanes, I mean, Nukeduck's obviously better than Nemesis. I don't think that's really debatable at this point. And then
Patrick's... Now, is he better based off, like, skill and veteran experience? Over less so Fnatic's Nemesis team failing him.
Well, I mean, Nemesis really did play really well at the beginning of the year, but Nukeduck was better throughout the entire split.
Yeah.
Nemesis played well throughout the entire year. I don't want to take away from him. I think he's been he's been on par with Humanoid, who I think is one of the most up and coming mid laners in the league. But Nemesis, I mean, Nukeduck is still a step above him, regardless of the situation. Nukeduck has been playing better this year, and I think that's going to be the reason as to why I'm going to be putting them over is the difference between mid and top is a big problem, because I don't think Fnatic can address that really. And on top of the fact, if they can't win the early game, Origen is going to outshot them to the late game. Reckless might be able to make the difference in the late game, because I do think he's an incredibly decent ADC who did actually look better than Patrick towards the later half of the split. But even if you consider that, I still think that Mithy's ability to make plays around the map is something that Hillsing has not had this year. He did have it like last year, but I don't think he's been looking that decent at it this year. So I think that as much as I'm going to put Fnatic first last blood.
I mean, they got third.
Yeah, I mean,
they were still really high,
but
no matter what.
They struggled at the beginning of the split because they couldn't adapt to this.
He was sweating. He was like, man, I put them at first, and they're like 10th place right now.
But they struggled against, like, in this early part of the split because, again, their inability to get stuff going around the map. Like, their bot lane was consistently losing because there was an on-hit meta.
That might have been because their young buck was literally drafting them losing lanes.
Well, it's not. You don't care about, like, it wasn't the losing lane. It wasn't always losing lanes, dude.
Yeah.
Like, they just lost a lot of them. And the top lane was just struggling because, again, I think that problem was, again, you're trying to put Whippo on carries when we obviously know he can only play tanks. He's a tank top laner, and tanks weren't in the meta, so it didn't benefit him that really well. Again, I mean, he can play Aatrox, I guess.
He lost.
He can play Aatrox.
He lost the last game in his playoffs on Aatrox, though.
Yeah, but he's decent on Aatrox at the very least. But again, I think that the big problem, if we're going to see Fnatic be able to overcome Origen, is going to be this difference in the top and mid, and the difference in the jungle, honestly. Because again, even though Broxah did step it up towards the later half, he still is this more so, instead of this early game aggressive on everything. Like on Lee Sin, he's early game aggressive, but on everything else, I think he tries to take that more facilitating route. And even then, towards the mid game, he does actually take that instead of the the aggressive engaging plays or anything like that.
You're saying he's not like Blabber, where he'll take the game over for himself. He's the guy that facilitate.
You think Blabber's a take the game over yourself person?
He's been having good games like that. Okay, so if I use someone else, he's not
somebody else.
He's not like Ning, where Ning will take the game over for himself.
Yeah,
Broxah is like, hey, I give you the lead, you win the game.
Yeah, I think that's a big problem that Broxah does have. I think that, I mean, again, he looked incredible on Lee Sin, so I think that's an outlier. But for the most part, Broxah doesn't have this ability to take over the game solo on his own. So I like again, Fnatic's difference in the jungle on top is a problem. I think like Patrick's ability to stay afloat in any lane that you give him is a big thing. And then Mithy is an incredibly decent shock. I'm like a playmaking support right in the league right now. I do think Fnatic has a lot, like the bottom teams, they're obviously third, so I think that their players, caliber-wise, are quite a bit above most of the bottom tier teams, except for maybe like Splyce and Vitality, but I do think they have the edge in the bot lane, which makes a slight difference, honestly.
I had Fnatic above Origen because I don't feel like that last series we saw was a quite indicator of how Fnatic was. I think that when you look back at how Fnatic started compared to how they ended, people will underestimate how that drastically they improved. They went from looking like, worst team in the league to looking like one of the more better ones.
Yeah, and did they ever beat G2 Origen?
They beat Origen the second time around.
Yeah, they beat Origen the second
time. They beat G2 the second time around.
Yeah, that was the very beginning of the second part of the split, though.
Yeah, and you have a lot of good pieces in the right direction. I feel like they're a team that knows what they want to do. See, Fnatic bring this little bit of structure that not a lot of teams in the actual league do. They bring this, I want to do, people call it cheese strats. I don't really like using that term because a cheese strat is only as good as the team that not is able to actually be able to handle it. And it's a strategy, and if it works and it gets you wins, you can't fault someone for that.
Why is it not called a cheese strat? Because you don't fault them for it.
The reason why I don't know why they specifically call it cheese strat.
It's called a cheese strat because, I mean, again, it's cheat. They're confusing players with picks that usually aren't in the meta.
But that's smart in a certain sense.
It doesn't mean it's not cheese just because it's smart. I mean,
do you want cheddar cheese or
cheese strats are usually pretty intelligent.
What type of cheese do you like?
Okay, so
okay, he was like, I don't like your jokes. Okay, so I feel like Fnatic bring a ton of structure. Their coaching staff knows how they want the players to play. The players themselves know how they want to play. I think Fnatic's biggest enemies are themselves because we can see they can go on massive winning streaks, win early game. They can win the late game at certain points. They have great shot calling. There's certain parts about Fnatic that are weaker, in my own personal opinion, than what it's like was G2 is my number one, is because you have Hylissang not doing what he did to get them to the 2018 World Finals. Fnatic has visibly struggled without Caps being in their lineup. I think that's what's that word? An understatement. People just don't like bringing it up because they don't want to talk about it, but hey, I'm not the type of guy. Cass made a lot of the impact of Fnatic, and we saw that Nemesis is not the same type of player, but he could be that player, but he's just not vocal enough. But I mean, those things can be worked on, obviously. Bwipo, we saw why he wasn't that good, and it was the reason why I said he wasn't that good, to a certain extent. Soaz being with him, and now you have a year where he's not with Soaz. That's the difference.
I mean, you didn't say he wasn't going to be good, you said it might happen, which is something that you can't take it into consideration.
It wasn't I say he wasn't going to be good, he wasn't going to be as good as people thought he was going to be.
Well, I mean, again, you didn't say, what you said was, I don't know, like, again, it's a possibility that he might, but again, you can't really say that for sure, for a fact that he's not going to be good.
Because remember, Soaz playing first means that Bwipo gets to come in with the extra knowledge.
It wasn't always the case, though. I mean, again, Bwipo took over the majority of the top lane shares towards the later half of the split.
But I don't feel like Bwipo's bad per se. He can have a lot of games where he looks like Licorice. Then he has a lot of games where he looks like
I mean, again, if we look at last year, he was better than Licorice, but I think that's kind of flipped around its head this year.
Like, there's games where he looks like Licorice, and other games where he looks like Huni. You know, there's going to be some games like that. Or he'll look like Piglet. No? Just kidding. He's gonna beat me up after this truck ride, right? But that's what I feel like. They have a really good coach. They have one of the best Western ADCs. That you have a really great shot calling support. I think that through a lot of the wins Hylissang got them was because of his aggressive shot calling plays that came back. I feel like they just had a really slow start that really didn't show all their strengths and weaknesses, but I do feel like they have that potential to be the first and second place team. We've seen it before. I think that there's not much really else to say, personally, the fact that I think Broxah and Nemesis are going to have to pair up and do their mid and jungle 2v2s a lot better. Because they had like one of the worst stats for mid and jungle 2v2s, though. Like, they're visibly not playing on the same page at certain points. And that's the disconnect with Fnatic, is that they want to play a certain way, but they're not playing together as a unit. And I think that's the problem. That's why I said the biggest problem to me is themselves. Because we've seen it happen before, where they can be that really great team we know they can be. That's why Fnatic is number 2.
Okay.
He had a lot to say about Fnatic before we came here.
Well, I mean, again, we already talked. You already went over this before you did it.
Do you think that Fnatic's differences in shot calling can make a difference?
Fnatic literally doesn't have better shot calling than Origen. I mean, that's just not true. I mean, it's obviously not the case.
But it is better than the bottom teams.
Well, obviously, I think that's a reason why they are going to beat out the bottom teams. On top of the fact that the difference in the ability for when Bwipo is on a tank, he's better than a lot of top laners in the bottom half.
Bwipo is smart about the game.
Like, he's smart enough. Again, I think that if we do that, Nemesis looks really good this year. He looks like one of the top 5 mid laners in the EU. There's that, and Broxah is looking a lot better towards the later half of the split. He was making things happen in the early game. So I think that if we're talking about Fnatic, they're obviously better in the bottom half because their ability to make things happen has been, I mean, it's drastically changed throughout the entire split.
They come in with the plan. They don't really come in with the, we're going to do this week thing. They come in with the plan, which is really beneficial to, like, week-to-week adaptation. I feel like they can, they're like, adaptable to a certain extent.
I mean, every team is moderately adaptable, to be fair.
Oh, no. There's Rogue.
Rogue is look moderately okay at the end of the split. I think that the big problem with Fnatic is that, again, I do think they have great players. They can compete with every single team in every single lane, for the most part, besides top lane. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to them being mostly centralized around the bot lane, in my opinion. And the ability for Nemesis to, if he does win the lane, he's forced into a situation where he has to make plays around the map, which I'd prefer if it was probably the jungler being in a situation that he has to do it, but it's not always, like, again, that's not always going to be the case. I think that Fnatic, obviously, I think they could be top 2. I think they could be Origen. I do think they have the players to do it. They have the early game, like, again, Origen isn't that early game aggressive. that's not really their play style, but they do have the ability to do it. Fnatic, I do think they're a little bit better at the early game aggressive portion of it, but they rely more on their bot lane than like the mid lane and other stuff like that. And Whipple's inability to get a lead in most of the lanes that he has to play is a problem for them because they're not able to fully cement them. Like if Whipple could step it up a little bit this split, I do think they could take that top 2 spot. I think that the only difference, in my opinion, between them and Origen is the drastic difference between top. Because, I mean, Alfari hasn't been incredibly decent, but Whipple has just been pretty bad this year.
Yeah, aside from the one good Aatrox game,
he did have
here and
a few games, and like he looked a lot better towards the like, when they started putting him out of tanks. He looked a lot better.
Yeah,
that's something that I could say about
him. That's all. That's yeah. I truly think at the end of the day, Fnatic fans, you know, you got to look at it with grain of salt. You're arguably second best, third. You got third last. They're going to Rift Rivals, so arguably, I think we have our EU Worlds teams here. I think you're going to have G2, Fnatic, and Origen going.
We didn't really talk about G2 yet, but there's only a few things we can say.
See, this we can bring up some points. Remember, CLG back from 2016 MSI, people thought coming back into the summer split of that split, they were going to be at least number 1 or number 2.
Well, I mean, that's something you should assume. Like, most of the time, it is the case. I knew there's a few times where it doesn't happen, but that's not really affected because G2 actually did take over the league that's previous split. So
yeah, CLG didn't take over the league in that split specifically.
Well, yeah, but I'm not going to say that CLG. I mean, I'm not going to say that there's not relevance between the G2 because they look a lot better than that G2 team did, like for the most part.
It's weird because let me try to bring it a different way. Because the reason why people predicted that CLG thing was because they they had great money at MSI. Now they can just transfer that back into the league.
I mean, there's a possibility that it might happen. Everybody seems.
But do you think G2 is going to get complacent? That okay, we're the best team in the world right now, and now we don't really have to improve anymore.
Well, I mean, again, I think that G2 still has that flaw that I think IG has too, which is that if they don't get things going in the early game, they are going to lose the game because their late game is still decent, and I do think they can pull it off purely off of players, but they do struggle towards the later half of the game. I think that's a big problem with them.
I think they fixed that in the SKT series, though. There were games where they got behind on SKT.
Well, I'll agree with that. They did actually do a lot better in the later half, but I do also still think that's a relevant situation because, again, we saw it against Fongu Buffalo. They lost both games because they couldn't.
They're cursed against Fongu Buffalo.
No, it wasn't. It was them playing poorly. Like, again, you could say it's poor drafts or anything, but they didn't draft poorly. Again,
they drafted the same way they drafted all the time.
These were serious games where they could get forced into third place instead, and they were trying. Like, anybody who says they weren't fully trying, I think that's not true.
The only thing I would say who was trolling in that tournament was IG during those games because he picked Victor Top, and we know Victor Top is bad. That's a troll thing.
Again, I think the biggest problem with this team was like the inability. Like, if G2 is gonna lose this, it's gonna come off of like the bot lane's weaknesses, which is still relevant. I don't care. Like, you can bring stats into it or anything, but again, the problem right now is Perks is. If you watch the games, he is the weakest portion of this team. He's the weakest part of this team, and he's the reason as to why when they do lose games, it's based off of him.
When he hit Lucian, he flashes forward.
If they can find comps that successfully can like use a mage in the bot lane, I think they do fine. But for the most part, we know that G2 does struggle with this bot lane weakness. I mean, again, that's been a relevant. Like, again, Fongu Buffalo they just lost lane. They didn't get ganked or anything. Well, they did eventually, but.
The games came through like diving.
Well, yeah, but they lost 1v1s. They were losing 1v1s in the lane to this Fongu Buffalo lane, who is decently strong, but the Team Liquid won 1-2.
The SKT game, the first game of the Best of 5.
Well, I'm just saying, like, all around, they were probably one of the weakest major region bot lanes in the league. Like, if you look at them, they didn't really win any of the lanes besides, like, kind of weird picks.
What would I say about them? They're a great stabilization bot lane.
They're not. They're not even. They're not stable. It's more so they're top, the jungle... I mean, including support, their jungle, mid, and top are so good that it really does cover up the flaws in this bot lane. And I think that, again, if a lot of the teams want to beat this team, you can't really focus the bot lane because they have 2 other carries that are 2 to 3 other carries who are who are insanely good.
Let's see. Okay, so let's try strengths and weaknesses. And
they have a lot of strengths. Of it again.
It's different strengths too. They're so flexible that you don't know what you're gonna get out of the drafts.
I'm gonna disagree fully. I mean, slightly on the flexibility because again, Perks' inability to play ADCs is a big detriment because that means they're not as flexible in that sense. I mean, their ability to play a secondary, really solid mage in the bot lane is a good thing for them.
You have really strong. You have you have the best. Now it's confirmed. You have the best top side in the EU. That is the best.
I don't
top
think
side.
anybody ever disagreed with that. That's been the case throughout the entire year.
You have Wonder, who can be an incredibly great carry and an incredibly great stable top laner. Jankos hasn't really done anything wrong. He came back to his H2K form, and we said if he did that, he was going to win the league. Because the reason why he didn't win the league at that point in the period of time is because he obviously had synergy issues and internal turmoil with H2K. That he came back to the First Blood King, and then he won a split. You have Caps, who I said was the best Western mid laner. That tournament proved that. He had a few bad games, That Corki game is a bad one.
He didn't look incredible against the Chinese and Korean people.
But he looked better against everybody else.
He looked great against everybody else. I don't understand why he struggled so hard.
I feel like he just has a weird mental block against Faker and Rookie.
Well, he did. I mean, he had a few good games, but for the most part, he didn't really do that good, which is kind of surprising.
The SKT series, I feel like he overcame Faker. But Rookie is just a different. I don't know how.
I don't even know if he again. He didn't really do that well.
He did well on his Akali games.
Well, yeah, he had a few good games. But is there any standout things besides the Akali, which I think is in a good spot right now?
The games where they won in the group stage.
I'm talking about him specifically. I'm talking about Caps specifically. We're not.
There was
talking
the
about
Sylas games he had.
Again, the Sylas is a counter to Akali. That is just the case right now.
Most of the TL series,
I'm not counting the TL. We're talking about specifically Faker, dude.
Oh, he was like, I ain't counting that at all.
Well, I literally talked about Faker, and then you started bringing.
You have the Akali. You have the Akali game. The Lissandra game, he outperformed him. You have the game.
The Lissandra game, I think he had 3 bad. I would say he had 2 to 3 bad games in the SKT series.
2 to 3.
2 to 3. 2 to 3 game. Bad.
Why did he play game 2?
Game 2. I mean, he had.
He played Sylas game 2, right?
Yeah, he had 2 bad games. I would say it was
Sylas, Akali, and Lissandra. He played Sylas, Akali, Lissandra.
Because Lissandra, he was on. You don't outplay people.
He definitely did well.
He did. I mean, Lissandra is just a pretty stable top mid laner.
I think overall, I don't think Caps is a coin flip player. Caps literally.
He is moderate. Like again, he does have those off games. I do think that's.
They're making it sound like it's Exile bad.
Well, it's not that bad. I mean, again, even his bad games are still pretty great. But I think that he does have a lot of games where he's not up to standard, or at the very least his own standard.
Like he's the outplays. You have him being really smart at the game.
But again, although I think that I don't think that's relevant to this conversation.
Because I was talking about super strengths, because all those strengths we just mentioned right there is why they're better. Because I would say they have the same problem as Fnatic. Their own worst enemy is them, because you have 2 options. They come back and they get complacent and they start losing a bunch of games, and then they're like, oh, okay, we need to kind of pick it up. Or you just come in as the best team and you're just dominating the league again.
We'll see. But again, I think that if we're going to see this G2 team even fail, because they're expected to get first place easily, if we're going to see them fail, I think it's going to come out of the bot lane or underperform it somewhere else.
Do you think that they're going to struggle against the other NA teams when they go to Rift Rivals?
Not at all.
Because you only face Team Liquid, though. And now you're going to face 2 other North American teams.
Cloud9 is not even going to slightly put up a fight to them, in my opinion.
I think Cloud9 will.
I think the only team that I could see moderately making.
He just hates Cloud9. He's always a resident Cloud9 hater.
You know that I don't think they're that good. I don't know why you're confused.
They have a better early. Team Liquid's just passive. Cloud9 has a better early game than Team Liquid.
Well, why do they keep losing then?
Hey, some days teams
TSM has the best early game in NA.
Now, TSM could fight them too.
That's what I'm saying. Only TSM could put up a slight fight, and even then, I don't think so. So I think that all around, I don't see G2 losing a series to them, or a game at the very least.
But like I said before, I think that looking at G2, best top side, their bot lane has a really high floor and a really low ceiling. I understand. They have a really high ceiling and a really low floor. That's pretty much what they are. I think Perks needs to learn that he's not a mid laner and he can't get out of every single situation. Once he learns that again, I think he's been just fine overall. He's been like, what, the 6th best ADC?
Possibly. So all around, I think that
Mickey X is still pretty good.
Yeah,
all things considered.
I think that's pretty much it. We didn't really need to talk about G2 that much.
But I mean, people were gonna expect it no matter what.
They weren't expecting that. We got a little sidetracked with the cap stuff.
Well, we wanted to kind of bring up points, the reason why he could be a lot better. That's pretty much it. Put your EU LEC Summer 2018 power rankings in the description box below. Any parting words?
No.
Oh yeah. If whoever wins this has to buy each other dinner.
No.